Hey guys, it's Dr. Justin Marcagiani here. I am with Garrett Salpeter, who is the CEO founder of Neufit Technologies down in Austin, Texas. Garrett is a great friend as well as an amazing colleague, and he's got a new book that we're going to chat about today. So I'm going to go through some of the biggest take-home items that anyone listening can use to help accelerate their body's ability to heal and perform better. So really excited to have Garrett on the podcast today. Garrett, how are we doing, man?
Thanks, Justin. It's awesome to be here. Great getting to catch up with you before hopping on here. And I'm excited to be on and appreciate the opportunity to talk about the book.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, love the graphics, love the cover. Really nice, really enticing. Been kind of going through some of the aspects of the book, different parts of the book. What was the process of, your last 10-year journey writing this book? I mean, for you, do you just kind of go through and think about your biggest clinical wins with patients? Like, how do you kind of go in and get this thing moving? Because there's so much that you can talk about over the last 10, 12 years of seeing thousands of patients. How do you go about and just start crystallizing that?
It's an interesting process. It's something that was on my mind for a while, like for a couple of years before I finally decided to start. And then I worked on it, in early morning hours before the kids woke up and in evenings. And, so I worked on it off and on again for a couple of years. The original catalyst for doing it was a combination of two things. One is people telling me, hey, you gotta write a book to share, you hear all these great stories about how this technology helps create these miraculous recovery stories. And then what really motivated me to finally do it is I kept getting asked by people like, hey, where can I read more about this? Hey, where's the book on this? And my answer until recently was, well, it's, stuff that I've learned by combining, reading textbooks and combining different mentorships and workshops and experiences that I've done in the fields of physical therapy and functional neurology and pedagogy and physiological psychology. And so there just wasn't a place where everything was kind of brought together in one way. And so that was a big motivating factor for me, was to have the resource to be able to share with people. And then I kind of fell into this trap of making it, just going like super deep on all these areas that I'm interested in. Originally, the first version of the book was probably too dense and academic. And so I had written, I'd got to get up in the morning for an hour or two before the kids wake up and write this over the course of, a year and a half, probably. Got to 130,000 words, which is like a huge, like a thick textbook encyclopedia type thing. And then we finally, we're talking with our team about, hey, what's going to be the most meaningful, valuable thing that we can offer to people? And we decided that it would be something that was more accessible, that more people, clinicians and lay people alike would be able to read. And so I worked with an editor to help break it down from 130,000 words to 60,000, literally like cut it in half. And then, and this is the finished product.
Very cool. Because I know you started off your PhD at UT in this type of field, in exercise physiology, human performance, looking at a lot of the electrical physiology technology and how it connects to healing. So you kind of had this thesis kind of in mind and took that and kind of translated it back into a handbook that people can apply kind of day in, day out for performance. So it's a big shift at the doctoral level back to the everyday human level.
That's right. It's been kind of an interesting thing, like that. It's very true. What I described to people when they would ask me for the book before this was out was, I'd say it's kind of this breadcrumb trail that I've been following through the research in these different disciplines. And as part of my journey in trying to piece together this knowledge base in a meaningful way that can be beneficial clinically and in all these different settings, part of my journey, like I was so passionate about learning this stuff that I ended up going back to school into this neuroscience-based PhD program in emphasis on motor control. And I ended up ultimately leaving that in order to launch our product and do the other things that I'm doing now. But we have a PhD neuroscientist who's our director of research now, who's been able to do that even better than I could or would. So that's great. But yeah, I mean, I literally have had to go all these different directions to piece it together, and it just it's very exciting to be able to come back full circle and package it together into a book like this that draws on all those different disciplines.
Yeah, very cool. Because how I first came across you before I moved down to Austin is I found a lot of your YouTube videos online. And one of the things that really struck me was you had a lot of these, stories, these kind of timeline situations where someone would come in with an injury and you would kind of timeline their ability to heal over 2-3 months or so from major injuries that would take 6 months, 12 months. And I was blown away with the idea that you could take people that, hey, this injury, according to conventional orthopedics, is a 1 year start to finish to heal. And you would take these people and get their injury recovery time down in half or even 60 or 70% faster. I thought like that was amazing. And it kind of sold itself that, hey, what you're doing is working. And so that was pretty cool. Can you talk about, what some of the tenets were that you were applying that was allowing you to do better than what the conventional PT, orthopedic surgery route was?
That's a great question. And it's kind of like, okay, what's the special sauce? What makes it different?
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the biggest themes in the book that we talk about, is making this distinction between hardware and software, between how most typical therapeutic interventions, most traditional physical therapy, orthopedic medicine is focused, really enamored with and obsessed with tissue and structure. Whereas there's a whole other side of that coin, right? There's function, like hardware and software. And the software, the function, which of course is controlled neurologically, is so often overlooked and ignored in these traditional models. And we've found that being able to prioritize the neurological response to injury and trauma is a huge catalyst for these breakthroughs. And a lot of it is just as simple as, look, if your body is naturally bracing and guarding and creating a bunch of tension around an injury, it can be blocking some of the blood flow and impairing the ability of the body to send nutrients and raw materials to heal there. So the tissue, of course, that hardware component is important, but the neurological response to injury is an impediment that blocks or delays that tissue healing process. And by putting that first, by looking first at that neurological response to injury, by finding where in the body it's being imposed and resetting or recalibrating that to an appropriate level, we've been able to open the floodgates, if you will, so that the body's natural healing process can progress without impairment. And when it goes at its normal rate, it's not like we're doing anything, we're just allowing the body to heal. And it's just, so few people have been able to see or experience what the body can do when it's really unleashed, so to speak, that those faster healing times seem miraculous. And really the miracle is in just removing those impediments, getting them out of the way, and allowing the body to do its thing, because it is a miracle.
So essentially conventional medicine, they're cutting out the injured inflamed tissue. There's not really a lot of look at how that tissue got injured from a mechanistic standpoint. Then they hand them off to the PT that's just typically stretching or strengthening that area without really looking at that whole chain. So essentially you're looking at everything like it's connected in a kinetic chain. So you're looking at all the muscles and the joints above and below, and you're looking at the nervous system's ability to recruit and stabilize those different areas. So you have your newbie device. So you're using that as a means of, one, I think, rehabbing and strengthening the muscle and the nervous system, but you're also using it as a means of detection. Can you talk about how it has dual purposes?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about this neurological response to injury and trauma, there's the concept, and then there's actually the process of finding where in the body it exists and what it's doing in the body. And to understand what it is, one of my favorite metaphors is actually to talk about this notion of, imagine a snake was coming in. So I'm in my home office here. Imagine a venomous snake was coming into my office. For me to react like this and kind of run away or mobilize some energy so I can protect myself, that's useful. That's value. That's a valuable, it's a fear-based fight or flight response that mobilizes me to take action so I can, fight or defend or protect myself or run away and flee. And that's valuable. However, if I react the same way to a rubber snake that my daughter put there, that's an overreaction. That is inappropriate. I'm wasting this energy, trying to protect myself from something that's not a real threat. And our brains and nervous systems do this to us. And forgetting these examples of like pain and injury, for example, a lot of people have this experience, thinking about someone who gets really nervous before they go public speaking, for example, something like that. That's the brain's way of saying, hey, this is life threatening. We got to protect you from this risk of being embarrassed, because if you go out there and make a fool of yourself, you could get kicked out of the tribe, for example, or there's like these deep survival fears associated with that. I think we all recognize that, that fear is kind of a hypersensitivity, or it's an overreaction, or it's a little bit miscalibrated to the situation. Like, we recognize intellectually we're not really going to die if we go out on stage, but it feels like that because we're overreacting. And a similar type of thing happens where if we have an injury, it's football season, we're working with a lot of professional and college and high school football players. If an athlete goes out and sprains their ankle and they are totally shutting down as in response to that injury and that trauma, if they're, creating tension to lock down some muscles and totally shutting down others, that can be potentially productive. If they were going to roll that ankle again, that bracing could be protective there. But if they're not doing that, if they're trying to rehab and get back to normal movement, those patterns actually stand in the way. They delay that recovery process. They're reacting, as if they're pounding that ankle again, like there's a real snake coming in, when really it's a rubber snake and they're safe now. They just have to get themselves in the right state to where they can heal. And by shifting, by first of all identifying where, so to actually answer your question now, if we're able to take the Newbie device and scan around in their body, we can find where those hypersensitivities are in the nervous system, where the brain and nervous system are shutting down muscles or creating these bracing and guarding patterns where they're holding on in other muscles. We can find where those are and then send this very unique direct current stimulation to reset and recalibrate the nervous system. And what does that really mean? Well, it means, an athlete who comes in with a sprained ankle, who's on crutches or can't put any weight on their leg, oftentimes after that first session can walk normally, can load weight on their leg without pain. And they make these amazing transformations in 15 minutes. And you think, gosh, what happened in that 15 minutes? Did the ligament that was partially torn, if it was a grade 2 and it's a partial tear of the ligament, did that ligament heal in 15 minutes? No, of course not. What happened was you reset and recalibrated that suite of neurological protective patterns, some of which are tension, some of which are inhibition or turning off muscles. And part of that is also pain. Pain is a protective, active output of the brain. That's part of that whole host of protective patterns. And by resetting that, you immediately restore function back to a more normal, healthy level. They're not ready to go back onto the football field after that session. However, they are in a state where they can move better. Their muscles can better support that injured tissue as it heals. And you've opened these floodgates so the healing mechanisms can actually work at their normal rate and do what they're capable of doing.
What was always fascinating for me is when you would use the Newbie device to kind of search and scan the different tissue. Let's say you had direct pain in the knee. When you would search, let's say from the hip down the quad, right, the bicep femoris, the rectus femoris into the calf, you would find hot spots or pain areas that the Newbie would pick up that you would perceive as pain, but they wouldn't necessarily be in the areas of pain. I think this is kind of what you're talking about. Is conventional medicine would say, oh, I feel pain in the knee. They're focused on the knee, but then you would scan it and you would get this feedback that the patient would feel, and they would feel areas of pain totally away from where that is. How does that happen? How does that work?
So that speaks to a couple of these really powerful concepts, like the difference between structure and function.
Right.
And also this notion that you talk about a lot, about getting to the root cause of the problem.
Yeah, right.
If you're walking around all day and part of your quad muscle doesn't work, you're just going to be kind of collapsing into that knee joint all day long, and you're going to be setting yourself up for injury. And eventually the knee starts hurting and you go and treat the knee, but you're not if you don't go upstream and address that dysfunction or why it happened in the first place, you're never going to have a true long-term resolution of the problem. And so what the mapping allows us to do is to find where the dysfunctions are. But
how do you measure that? Like what's the Newbie putting through? Like, is there resistance in the tissue due to inflammation, lack of blood flow? Like, what's causing that feedback at the tissue from a biochemical, physiological level?
Yes. So the reaction. So one of the things we're working on is being able to measure some of these quantitatively, and that we should have some really cool information on that, in the next couple of years as we build out our research program. What we know now and what we're identifying are areas where these exact neurological protective mechanisms are present. So what we're doing as we're scanning around. So if I have an electrode pad like this and I'm scanning around on the body, what's really cool about this current, so traditional, first we need a little context here so this makes sense. Mm-hmm. Traditional electrical stimulation devices, alternating current, TENS units, Russian stim, when you turn up to a high enough level to really make a difference, they cause muscles to contract, and that becomes the limiting factor. Whereas with the Newbie, we can, at least to some degree, we can bypass a lot of that protective muscle contraction and speak more directly and powerfully to the nervous system. So again, a little bit of difference between structure and function, thinking directly about the nervous system. When we scan over the body, we're sending a signal to the nervous system and the brain saying, hey, this area is being used, this area is being loaded. Then we go here, hey, this area is being used, this area is being loaded. Here, hey, this area is being used, being loaded. And wherever the body is working well, the brain sees that and says, if we're scanning you, it says, oh, that's just Dr. Justin's deltoid doing its normal thing. That's just Dr. Justin's bicep doing its normal thing. There's nothing alarming about that.
Right.
But if we stimulate a muscle or an area that either hasn't been working recently because of bad habits, or an area where one of these hypersensitivity and these protective patterns are being imposed on the body, if we scan over one of those, the brain sees that and says, whoa, 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 that's threatening, that's alarming, and it fights against it. And it reacts kind of like a trigger point. If you were working on somebody and that you find that trigger point area that's more sensitive. So we find these areas of hypersensitivity, and then we want to stimulate them and teach ultimately the brain and the nervous system that it can calm down that hypersensitivity. So it's, instead of, it's like if you're driving your car, you can either hit your throttle down harder, or you can just take your other foot off the brake. Here we're trying to train the body to take the foot off the brake where it had been imposing these limiting patterns.
Very cool. So I know with the Newbie, unlike your typical TENS unit, right? You're typically not going to be exercising with like a TENS unit. It's more like an electric aspirin. It's just kind of blocking the pain going to the brain. Here, you're actually able to move it and rehab. I'm just curious, a lot of different techniques in soft tissue world, like Graston and active release technique. Part of the reason how they promote healing is they work on improving blood flow, and they help release the fascia from the muscle belly. My experience using it when I exercise with the pads on the various areas, sending the current, and I feel like there may be a fascial release on that muscle helping to improve pain. I'm just curious, what's your take on that fascia and the muscle kind of being mobilized and moving better?
This is a really interesting topic, and there's a few thoughts I have on that. One is, when people are doing manual therapy, it's kind of this interesting.
Oh, and I'm sorry, just to add one little context.
Yeah.
If this is my muscle belly, right, the fascia is like my shirt on top of it. And so when tissue gets inflamed, it's like wearing a wet t-shirt. It's hard to get it off. And so just kind of giving people a visual, imagine the wet t-shirt on someone's body, that t-shirt's stuck. And so helping to mobilize that t-shirt, so to speak, can help promote healing. Go ahead.
So there's this really, really important, interesting connection between the movement of tissues and the function of the nervous system. So like in your example, if that fascia or that shirt is glued down on the tissue underneath it, you miss out on that gliding and sliding between layers, and you don't get the neurological input from that area. So
Bingo.
You lose out on that. So the nervous system is this big feedback loop, and all of the outputs of the nervous system, which of course includes movement and pain. It also includes, hormones. It includes heart rate and blood pressure, digestion, like the nervous system controls our visceral organ function. So all of these outputs of the nervous system that are relevant for health and cognitive performance and athletic performance and overall well-being, all these outputs of the nervous system are vitally dependent on the inputs given to the nervous system. And that of course is the things that you talk about in functional medicine, nutrition and diet and these lifestyle factors. It all absolutely has to do with movement also. These neurological inputs of including the tissues gliding and sliding over each other are super relevant for the overall health of the nervous system, which is super important for the health of the overall body. So being able to, there's a few things that happen. Being able to get movement into those tissues is very important. A lot of manual therapists, when they say, I'm releasing adhesions or I'm feeling this tissue move or something like that, a lot of what we're learning is that what they're really doing is not making as much of those structural changes as they think, but they're actually giving neurological inputs, the mechanoreceptors, the nerve receptors. They're actually activating those to create more functional changes than structural changes. And ultimately, though, you need both. Like you need the tissues to move over each other, and you need to move them through enough ranges of motion and create the inputs so that the brain gets enough input so that it can maintain healthy function and get all the inputs it needs to drive appropriate controls of the body for movement and everything else. And when we're working with the newbie, you're affecting both. You're moving and affecting structures. You're getting mechanical tension, which can definitely help move, create the kind of friction that helps break up issues between the layers of those tissues. And you're getting the neurological input. So it can work well in combination with those other manual therapies, and ultimately you need both. I mean, you need good structure, you need good function, and I hope that adequately addresses the question. But I think ultimately we're trying to work on both.
So we'll put some links down below for people that want to get more information, either about seeing Garrett or Garrett's clinicians at his clinic, or if you're a practitioner and you want to get more information on being able to use this device at your clinic, or if you're someone abroad that wants to work with Garrett staff virtually, we'll put some information down below. So someone comes in, right? You give them a workup, you have a full physical exam, you're looking at neurological signs, you're testing muscles as well to help find which muscles are off and on for compensation pattern stuff. You're using the newbie, you're scanning, looking for all these areas of dysfunction. You're always evolving your method, right? The Neufit method. What else has been plugged into the Neufit method the last year or two that you've kind of added on recently?
So the biggest thing that we've done in the last year is really explored the benefits of using very specific frequencies. And this is one of the biggest champions of this type of work is a doctor named Garret Salpeter, who has seminars on frequency-specific microcurrent. And the basic premise is that basic premise is resonance. So for example, if I have the keys to my car and I go out in the parking lot, I hit the unlock button. This key only unlocks my car. It doesn't unlock your car or my friend's car or the other car across the parking lot. It only unlocks my car because that signal resonates with that car. It's also the same thing if you ever heard of like the opera singer who hits that note, much better than I would do. and that particular frequency of that note resonates with the lead atoms in glass, and it breaks the glass. So we can apply certain frequencies to the body that will resonate or preferentially go to and interact with certain tissues. So if you're trying to recover from an Achilles tendon injury, for example, we can, in addition to our usual treatments working on neuromuscular function, we can use a particular frequency that would direct that signal to the tendon tissue and help even further speed up the healing and amplify the healing effect of that, increase more blood and more resources specifically to that tissue.
Is this a new feature on the newbie where you can adjust the frequency?
So it's something that we built it in to the newbie because I had kind of glimpses of this, and we've only really started to explore the full benefits or more of the benefits of that in the last year. And it's part of, for clinicians who are have completed our certifications. That's part of the level 2 certification that we put out sometime in the last year. And that's been really exciting to see some of the outcomes that people have been able to create with that. And that goes down a whole road of like Dr. McMakin, for example, has frequencies for different organs and things like that. We, with the newbie, work and our scope is more around, neuromuscular conditions and pain and things like that. So, we're not necessarily able to, speak about or make direct claims related to
Right.
the health of certain organs or things like that. But there are some really cool things that people are able to do with this concept.
Very cool. There are two more things I want to hit on. In the book, you talk about heart rate variability, which is essentially the unevenness between the heartbeat. And it's a good window into recovery and the parasympathetic nervous system response. How are you gauging the amount of workload that the people that you're working with can handle? Are you using HRV? How do you know you're doing too much? How do you know you're in the sweet spot? How do you apply that with your patients?
That's a great question. And this is, I think, part of the future of medicine and sports performance training is this notion of stress management.
Yeah.
And what heart rate variability, what it basically shows us is it answers the question of how well are you, this individual standing in front of me, how well are you able to keep up with all of the stressors in your life right now? If you're just like holding on to keep up with everything, you don't have as much bandwidth to adapt to these subtle changes in air pressure as you breathe, and you don't have these minor fluctuations in your heart rate. Whereas if you are able to keep up with all that, then you have more bandwidth to adapt to these subtle changes. And so heart rate variability is a great measurement. So we look at a couple different things. That's a big one. If we look at someone's HRV status when they come in for a session and we see like, dang, they're really in a stressed out state, we may have a more recovery oriented session with them that day. Over time, we also, for people who have these wearable devices that track their sleep, track their HRV, we have them do that. We just completed a study with BioStrap, who makes this one that I'm wearing on my wrist. Wow. It's the best clinically validated of these, relatively inexpensive wearables. They're within 1% measurement of the gold standard of electrocardiogram. So like when you put electrodes all over the body and measure the activity of the heart. Yeah. So cool. they have, we worked with them and we saw that doing sessions on the newbie, that people increased their heart rate variability. They decreased their resting heart rate without doing any cardiovascular training at all. Also improved sleep and arterial elasticity, so blood flow and blood vessel health. And so, all of that factors into saying, looking at heart rate variability is something that we like. We don't always look at it within a session. Sometimes it's, sometimes there's a little bit of a delay in feedback. We'll do something that day, see how their numbers were that night and the next day, and then dial it back in the next time they come in. So sometimes you get real-time feedback. Sometimes it's, a day or two, and you have to kind of start slow, see how much they can handle, walk up to that line. And you also have to factor in the stresses, in there, because someone one day, if they've slept well and eaten well, might be, and it's, a weekend or something, might be able to handle a lot more than if they come in the middle of a week when they have a deadline, if they just, had a fight with their spouse or fight with their boss at work or something like that, and they didn't sleep well the night before and they're sick, they're going to be able to handle way different amounts of stress and input on those days too.
Yeah, which is totally different training philosophy. 10, 20, 30 years ago, it was kind of like no pain, no gain. You have to build character. This is to toughen you up. And it's like, well, really the goal of training is to add a stress into the neuromuscular system so your body can adapt from it and get stronger, not so it can get weaker. Because if you can't adapt to that stress, you're just breaking your body down versus building it up in training. And so it's really kind of training smarter versus harder kind of mindset.
Amen. Yeah. I just think about it as, if I'm going to invest the time and effort and possibly money to go, to a physical therapy session or to a training session, I want to have a return. I want to have some benefit to show for that. So it's about, it's ultimately about finding, it's not minimal or maximal, it's optimal. It's that kind of bell curve. It's finding the right amount of input to get the correct output.
Love it. Love it. Very cool. You also started working with Terry Wahls, who is a popular figure in the functional medicine community, especially on the autoimmune side. Dr. Wahls' kind of story is, for the listeners, she had multiple sclerosis, was at one point even wheelchair bound and couldn't walk, and then was able to make different changes in her diet to help reverse her MS. And MS is an autoimmune condition that affects the myelin, which is the coating around the nerve. So she was able to change her nervous systems, or change her immune systems attacking on her nerves, so then she could actually start to heal and recover. And now she's fully walking. So you're using the newbie device as a means to help stimulate growth, healing. Can you talk more about what that application is?
Yeah. So Dr. Walls, I'm glad you mentioned some of her story because it's super inspiring. And she's now been able to help through her Walls protocol and her book and her research, been able to help hundreds of thousands of people
Yeah.
stop the progression of or even reverse their MS.
Hmm.
And it has to do with a functional medicine approach, reducing
Yep.
the inciting or damaging influences that are causing the immune system to go haywire and create
Yep.
this autoimmune
Gut
environment.
permeability. Yep.
All this stuff that know more about than I do and that you talk about in your podcast. And the reason we worked with her is that she had this limitation in her program where she could help people stop the progression of their MS, and then they get to the point where they say, okay, that's awesome, now what can I do to restore the function that I lost? Now what can I do if I want to be able to drive my car again, or not have to have a caregiver at home, or I want to regain my autonomy, I want to be able to walk or play the piano again? Like, okay, like that's awesome that we stopped further damage, but now how can we do that? And that's where we got connected by a mutual friend. And she saw, I was describing Neufit to her and some of the work we'd done with
Hmm.
other neurological patients, and she saw, hey, this kind of fills in, this next step in our program. And since then, she's, invited me to speak at several of her seminars and live and virtual
Wow.
events. And she very graciously gave an endorsement for my book. And, we've been able to work with her to share this message and kind of plug in Neufit as part of her program. And so through her, we've been able to introduce this to hundreds of thousands of people, and many thousands of people have, some have worked with us or gotten their own machine and worked remotely, and many more have found Neufit practitioners. So we have on our website, we have a directory that we can link to, a directory of certified practitioners around the world who offer Neufit. And so, many of these patients have gone and found people in their community, or, sometimes they can find someone across town or, nearby that they can go see and do this work. And we've seen people, sometimes restore a little bit of sensation and function, sometimes get out of a wheelchair and walk again. And we've seen some of these transformational, really, really inspiring and amazing stories.
So when you work with patients like that, are you doing a scanning method throughout that muscle belly area? Or are you just generally hitting the major muscles that aren't working appropriately?
So we typically will do a scan so that we can direct that
Hmm.
stimulation, in basically in the areas where we're going to get the most bang for the buck.
Hmm.
Um, and we typically would do a scan. Sometimes you can guess where you're going to put the pads, and you can guess
Yeah.
correctly based on knowing where their impairments are. But sometimes there's some nuances or different segments or different areas that pop up. So we do like to do the scan, at least in the first session as part of an assessment. And then from there, we get the information to build a custom program and figure out, okay, where we need to stimulate to help get sensation or function back in the hands and feet, or start to build enough strength so they can work towards standing and then walking, or start to rebuild dexterity to be able to do whatever the activity is that they want to do.
Very cool. And then last question I have for you out of the gates here would be, nutrition is obviously important, right? It's the building blocks of all of our nerves, our muscles, right? Quality is important. We don't want to add more toxins via, plastics and hormones and pesticides, those kind of things. What are some of the foundational diet changes that you work on with your patients to really accelerate improvement? Is it the quality of the protein? Is it a certain amount? Is it fats? What are the best bangs for your buck with nutrition to get better healing?
So we're looking at everything through a neurological lens. And when we do
Hmm.
that, we end up drawing many similar conclusions as you do through a functional medicine lens. So there's a ton of overlap. The maybe the way we speak about it, or maybe some of the things we prioritize or emphasize are a little different. But for us, one of the biggest, especially in these autoimmune conditions, right? When you talk about the immune system and inflammation gone haywire, but also just for brain and nervous system health overall, inflammation is such a key, because if you eat an inflammatory meal, you'll see IQ drop 10
Yep.
or 20 points, because the inflammation impairs brain function so significantly and impairs peripheral nervous system function so
Blood flow
significantly.
too.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, reducing inflammation is one of the highest priorities, be whether you're just looking at overall health or you're looking specifically through that lens of trying to optimize neurological function. So that becomes a big deal. Reducing inflammation. So we're looking at, cutting out as many omega-6 seed oils as possible. Look, getting more saturated fats from from good, healthier sources. I mean, we're talking about, grass-fed beef or pasture-raised other animals or wild-caught fish, different things like that. The sources of fat become really important in reducing those omega-6s. Having good monounsaturated fats like avocado and olive oil, and assuming someone is screened for food sensitivities, and none of these things are going to be like an individual person's kryptonite or something. Like eggs can be great for some people.
Yep.
Have a good health profile if they have those nice, good, dark orange yolks. But for some people have sensitivities and shouldn't have them.
So essentially, you're really pulling out all the inflammatory stuff, the refined sugar, the grains, those kind of things, maximizing good fats, maximizing good proteins, obviously having enough building blocks. So the tissue we're breaking down, there's enough reserves to build that tissue back up as well.
That's right. Yeah. So all those sources of fat I mentioned, the meats and eggs, also happen to have very good sources of protein associated with them. I also like collagen protein if we're trying to help someone rebuild tissues. Yep. And then also when we talk about inflammation and health of the nervous system, the gut is so important. So, I'm a big fan of, I have, different fiber powders that I put in my drinks every morning. And then, the nervous system also is a big input. So trying to do what we can to get that parasympathetic activation, as many times as we can throughout the day to help with digestion is also a huge deal.
Are you still doing the ample drink every day?
I haven't done those in a while. I like those. I haven't done them. Let's see. Well, there was a reason I stopped. Oh yeah. I think I really like the concept. I just didn't love as much of the like whey and egg white proteins. I'm more of a collagen and, meat guy.
Yeah, I'm a big collagen guy too. You just don't get enough connective tissue amino acids, the hydroxyproline, proline, glycine. Interesting. I have the same situation. What's one clinical pro you've come across recently that you think most of the audience will be able to benefit from? Like just anything in the last couple of months that's like a real heavy hitter that would help a lot of people.
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, in our realm, when we're doing a lot more of this, pain, movement, dysfunction, injury, helping people. The frequencies that I already mentioned, the biggest thing that jumps to mind in the last few months is some more of this work that we've done on frequencies.
Cool.
And being able to find these resonant frequencies that it's really cool when you can feel this kind of resonating effect. It feels like you almost get these charges building up. So it's something that admittedly someone would have to, find a provider who has our device in order to experience it. But for our practitioners, being able to identify this and initially these frequencies were only used really in the microcurrent realm, but to use them with stronger power delivery, with stronger current levels and deliver that power, that's been one of the biggest things that really jumps out. And I just have already seen some really cool things happen there. So that's one of the biggest, more for practitioners who do have access to this device, admittedly, but it's a really cool effect when you feel that resonance happen.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for all the excellent information, Garrett. Again, the Neufit Method, all kinds of good info and more. We talked about a couple of things in the book here as well. Take a look at it. If you have chronic pain issues and you're not healing, or you have lingering injuries that aren't getting over the top, we'll put a link down below where you can reach out to Garrett and his staff. And we'll put a link to the book as well. We appreciate it. Anywhere else, Garrett, the listeners can go and check your information out at?
So we're most active social media wise on Instagram, and the handle is Neufit RFP, and it's Neufit NEU, like neurological, FIT, and then RFP for rehab fitness performance. So I'm on there, our team's on there. We respond to DMs and comments and everything, and we'd love to interact with you there. And hopefully, if you're interested in the book, hopefully you'll read it. If you check it out on Amazon, please do leave an honest review on there. The feedback is wonderful. It helps us know what people like, what people don't like, what content we can provide more of. I can assure you that having put in the hours on the book, I really appreciate that feedback very much.
Very cool. And if you guys are listening and driving, we'll put links down below where you guys can reach out and support the book. All right, Garrett, awesome chatting with you. You have a great day, man. Good chatting. Take care.
Thank you, Justin. It's been a pleasure.
Same here. Bye now.